Hi everyone, I'm Daniel, and today I'll be talking about the noise and temperature levels of the recently released Xbox One X. So why am I making a video dedicated to this topic? Well, when I got my Scorpio edition, when it came out, set it all up and started playing games, I immediately took notice to how loud it was, and I thought that was very odd, especially compared to the base Xbox One, which was whisper quiet. And looking around online, there seems to be two distinct camps of people reporting that their One X is very quiet, just like the original Xbox, and another group of people saying that their One X was very loud. And it was enough people where it seemed like it was functioning as intended. Now, at the end of the video, I'll get into my conclusions and my hypothesis as to why this is so. If you want to go ahead and jump in the description box of this video, I'll put timestamp links to all of my test results and my conclusion if you want to just jump to those. But first, I want to talk about my setup and then go through my data before really talking about why I think that there are two different sound profiles for the Xbox One X. So, setup, as you can see, I have my Xbox One X here on my desk. The Xbox One X takes in air from the sides and exhausts out the back. So there's plenty of airflow here for the Xbox One X, so that is not a problem. 2, measure the sound levels of the One X. I got a decibel meter, the BAFX 3370, picked this up on Amazon, had really great reviews. The most notable statistic about it is that it takes 2 measurements per second. I also have an IR thermometer here that I used to read the temperatures of the One X, both of the console itself and the exhaust. For the most part, it was also set up on my desk here in a clamp arrangement, 1.5 feet, maybe 2 feet away from the console, so not a ridiculous distance there. The sound meter was set up only a couple of inches from the rear exhaust of the Xbox. I figured that would be the loudest part of the Xbox. I didn't want to put it pointing directly into the Xbox, as it would be slightly louder inside and not representative of what the user would be hearing. But slightly above it, but still pretty close. And of course, the fan is near the exhaust, so I theorized that would be the loudest part of the Xbox. So that was the setup. If you have any more questions about my setup, feel free to ask a question in the comments below. But let's go ahead and get into my readings and test results. So first, of course, you need a control for a test like this. So with everything set up but nothing turned on, my room being at the ambient noise level that it would be at this time of year in Florida, air conditioning doesn't need to kick on, so that wasn't a factor. I have my fan on, but it's a low setting. And so the control was 26 degrees Celsius of the thermometer pointed at the Xbox, and the sound level was 42.3 decibels. So then I went ahead and turned on my Xbox. I let it sit idle for 10 minutes. And I'll also note that during all of these tests of the Xbox, I made sure that there were no background downloads happening, as that would be an additional power draw and therefore heat produced. So during these tests, there were no background downloads happening on the Xbox. So Xbox, cold boot, idle, 10 minutes. Temperature was about 30.5 to 31 degrees Celsius. And then the sound level was 43 decibels when idle. Comparing this to the original Xbox One, we have an idle temperature of 31 degrees Celsius and an idle sound level of 43.4 decibels. I'll also note that for the vast majority of, other than my final Blu-ray tests, All of these tests were done sequentially. What I'm describing is what I did in the order that I did them at. So I was throwing as much in the shortest amount of time possible at this console to push it to its limits to get these test results. So first thing I tested was Forza 7. This of course is a native 4K 60 frames per second game on the Xbox One X. It is one of these showcase titles for the One X and what it is capable of. First test I did, console and so during Forza 7 to test this, I did this with weather effects, rain effects turned on, with a full array of 23 AI cars on track, and I raced in third person for additional resources needed, required for that game. So all the reflections, all the AI, pushing that to its limits. So first test for Forza 7, I got 38 degrees Celsius for the console temperature. And then I got it averaged, I was seeing around, for sound levels, 44.1 to 44.8 decibels. I then did another test. These next two tests were more or less identical, different racing scenarios, but still weather effects, third person camera, 23 AI cars on track. I was getting about 39 degrees Celsius for console temperature. And then sound levels went up a little bit, 44.5 to 45 decibels. Now, this is where things got interesting, and this is where I saw what I was experiencing before I actually started getting test results. So, the interesting thing about the Xbox, or at least mine anyway, the fan will burst. So it'll go to a much higher speed for a short period of time to get the temperatures back down, I'm guessing. And so I saw a burst of 50 decibels. So when the fan burst, I saw a reading of 50 decibels when playing Forza Motorsport 7. That is extremely loud. Of course, decibels are a logarithmic scale. So the higher you go, the more the line curves, essentially. Comparing this to the original Xbox running Forza Motorsport 7, console temperature was 44 degrees Celsius and the sound level 43 decibels. You will see this as a commonality with the original Xbox going forward. So next test I did was Insects. This is kind of like a tech demo that Microsoft put out to showcase the capabilities of the One X, and you can flip between various different modes, including a 1080p and a 4K mode. So Insects running on the Xbox One X in 1080p mode, temperature was 39 degrees Celsius. Sound levels were about 43.7 to 44 decibels. Then when switching up to 4K, you get temperatures going 39 to 40 degrees Celsius, and sound levels jump up 44 decibels to 45.5 decibels. Then when running Insects on the original Xbox One, of course at 1080p, you get a console temperature of about 41 degrees Celsius and a sound level around 43.2 decibels. So this one's interesting. So Insects running at 1080p on the One X is louder than it running on the original Xbox. So that's pretty crazy. Next up, I tested Rise of the Tomb Raider. This is also another high-profile, graphically intensive game. This has a native 4K mode, and so with that native 4K mode turned on, I did two different tests, the first of which I ran through the end sequence of the game, the final part of the single-player story. And so with a console temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, I got sound levels at around 45 decibels and a plus or minus 0.4. So it was hovering around that 45 decibels, but it did burst when I was playing it, when I was recording, and I saw a burst of 46.2 decibels. Then I also ran through the geothermal valley, which is an open world section of the game. It is the most intensive, resource demanding part of the game. Again, a console temperature of 40 degrees Celsius, and I got sound levels ranging from 44.7 decibels to 45.5 decibels. It also, the fan burst when I was running through the geothermal valley, and I got a recording of 48 decibels. Very, very high sound level. Now, running through the geothermal valley, Rise of the Tomb Raider on the original Xbox, I got an output temperature of 43 Celsius and an output sound level of 43.1 decibels. So all of those tests, so Forza 7, Insects, and Rise, all done sequentially at the same time, one after the other. So I was pushing those consoles to the limit when I did these tests. Next, I did a Blu-ray drive test. Blu-ray drive, when the Xbox is reading a disc that is theoretically louder than the fan because it's spinning the disc constantly because it has to be reading it. So I did a test of a 4K Blu-ray on the One X. I of course did Planet Earth 2. And so I did a sound level check at two different points, my natural point, my standard point of the exhaust, and then I moved it closer to the drive to see if that was any louder. So on the One X 4K Blu-ray, the exhaust sound level was 45.4 decibels. When I moved the decibel meter to the opposite corner of the Xbox, so by the Blu-ray drive, I got a reading of 47 decibels, and this is a constant 47 decibels. That is extremely loud. The Blu-ray drive on the One X is absurdly loud, honestly, and I would not recommend playing movies in this thing. It's just that loud. Compared to the original Xbox, the exhaust decibel reading was 43.8 decibels, and when I moved it closer to the drive, it was only 44.1 decibels. So that 43.8 to 44.1 is essentially negligible, but when you compare 44 to 47, because this is a logarithmic scale, that is extremely loud. That is a noticeable difference in sound. And then one more reading I have here, I got a temperature reading for the exhaust. So the One X, you very easily get a different temperature for the hottest part of the main console and then the exhaust. So exhaust temperature reading for the One X, I got 71 degrees Celsius. That is very hot. And then for the original Xbox, because the exhaust is exposed directly above the heart where the processor is, a little bit different in terms of the temperature readings there, but pointing my temperature sensor directly into the original Xbox One, I got a temperature reading of 48 degrees Celsius. So that's all fine and dandy, but you need some context for these readings. And so I went and compared my readings to Digital Foundry's review. They are, of course, the very technical arm of Eurogamer. They do very in-depth reviews and analysis of hardware and games. And this is what they presented in their review of the One X. For temperature readings, they got 45 degrees Celsius for the top of the One X. That's a difference of about 5 degrees compared to mine, so that's a pretty big difference. I'm not sure why that's such a big difference for me, but they only got a reading from the exhaust of 68 degrees Celsius. So that's interesting. I'm not entirely sure why there's such a difference there, especially on both ends. That's kind of weird. But the more interesting of the readings that they provided, sound level readings, they never recorded a decibel reading higher than 45. The loudest Digital Foundry's Xbox One X, and they tested multiple consoles, they got 45 decibels. That compares to my loudest reading of 50 decibels. That is a significant difference in readings. 5 decibels, because it's a logarithmic scale, is a very, very noticeable difference. And even then, 50 decibels was only a burst, but I was often getting close to 46 decibels when playing normally, and the fan was varying, so that's still a 1 decibel difference under normal play, under the normal fan spinning. So those were my test results. So why is this happening? I think it has to do with the Hovis method that Microsoft implemented when constructing the chips with AMD. So real quick, the Hovis method is a process of which you give processors the amount of voltage required to reach a certain frequency. You see, when you normally build processors, you're obviously making it for a certain spec, but there is still a slight variation. And with a desktop processor, you normally don't notice this because it has a range of frequencies that it operates at. You're hooking it up to a big power supply, so any difference in voltages that the processor requires to reach certain frequencies, it'll take that. Usually when you see these differences in desktop processors is when you go to overclock them. In order to overclock a desktop processor, you have to give it more voltage. And what it's typically referred to as the silicon lottery. And if you hit that, that means you get a desktop processor that requires very little voltage to get to higher frequencies relative to other processors which aren't able to do that at stable, because processors have a certain range of voltages that they can operate at. And so with applying more voltage, the faster the processor is able to operate. When it comes to a game console, all processors operate at the same frequency. So purely performance of one Xbox One X to another, going to be identical. However, the amount of voltage one Xbox One X compared to another will need in order to reach that performance, the voltage levels required can be different. And so, because Microsoft applied this Hovis method in order to get better yields, so more usable processors to put in Xboxes, that means different processors require different amount of voltages to reach the same baseline of performance. And so my hypothesis is that my and other Xbox One X's require more voltage. And when you put in more voltage, you're generating more heat. And so that is why the Xbox, my in particular, and some others, are louder, is because the fan is spinning higher and more often. And I think that Microsoft also applied an interesting fan curve, fan profile with the Xbox One X. I'll try to play a sample for you here. I'm not sure if the audio the microphone caught it properly, but at least on my One X, the fan is constantly varying. And so it's not like the original Xbox One where the fan, as you can see from my test results, the original Xbox One's fan is a constant about 43 decibels. It never really changes in speed no matter the load. That is the opposite with the One X. The fan is constantly varying. Even when the console is idle and you get right up next to it, you can hear the fan varying its speed, which is very odd. So they put a highly variable fan curve on the One X, I suspect, so that it's not at high levels at all times. If it can go lower, then it goes lower. So in order to reduce the noise level, but it also is able to kick up when it needs to dissipate more heat. So that's why you hear the fan bursting extremely loud, is in order to dissipate more heat, and then it goes back down when it doesn't need to be so high. And because it's such a small box, because it's a much smaller fan than compared to the original Xbox, is why it's a higher pitch and it's far more noticeable when it spins up to higher speeds, not unlike PlayStation 4 consoles, which are known for having like jet engine fans, because they have a much smaller fan inside of there. And so it's very interesting. I think this is because of the Hovis method, because some Xboxes require more power, they're generating more heat, and therefore they're louder. So anyone out there saying their Xbox One X is silent, or some other person is saying their Xbox One X is louder, both people are right in my opinion. I don't have the means to test this any further and get beyond a hypothesis. I don't have thousands of dollars to buy multiple One X consoles and test this. If I were to step my testing up another level, I would get some sort of device to measure the power draw of the One X and see if the power draw of the One X spikes right before the fan bursts to dissipate more heat. That's my guess. So if it's drawing more power, so it's going to get hotter, and therefore the fan would need to burst to dissipate that heat. I think that would be an interesting test to do, but I also don't have the means to do it. I only have so many eyeballs and so many cameras. I don't think I would be able to set up that where I'm playing a game, looking at the sound level, looking at the temperature, and looking at, or at least recording, the power draw as well. If there's someone out there that wants to replicate my tests, feel free to ask me questions. I've tried to supply as much detail as possible of my testing arrangement. Again, I don't know how Digital Foundry did their tests, but they're very in-depth. So I don't doubt the validity of their 45 decibel reading. So the fact that they only got 45 and I was getting significantly higher than that tells me that there is definitely a difference in power draw between different One X consoles, which is pretty interesting, to say the least. Am I okay with this? I'm gonna say short answer no, but if you would like my extended thoughts on the One X, I'm working on a full review, so if you want to check that out, be sure you're subscribed to see when I put that up. If you enjoyed this in-depth technical video, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. And of course, thank you all for watching. I hope to see you next time. Bye.